watching and listening to Breakfast with Ellie and Mark.
Let's take a look at the front pages for you this Friday morning. First, with the Times leading on Rishi Sunak's new plan to help 16 million vulnerable people with their energy bills this winter.
Meanwhile, the Express warns the country that energy bills this winter could soar to £5,000.
Mirror branding the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and Ofgem and E.ON bosses as clueless for failing to improve the ongoing cost of living crisis.
The Daily Telegraph focuses on Liz Truss, saying she will not impose a windfall tax on energy companies.
Well, The Guardian looks at the ongoing climate crisis with a dramatic picture on the front, saying that droughts in more British regions likely to be declared and more water restrictions introduced as well.
The Eye also looks at the ongoing climate crisis as the risks of wildfires is expected to increase.
On to the Daily Mail, questioning why NHS waiting lists have not become shorter after the huge national insurance rise of April.
The Sun front page reports on day 4 of the trial of Ryan Giggs, who's been accused of assaulting his ex-girlfriend and subjecting her to coercive control. Ryan Giggs denies all of those charges.
And finally, the Daily Star asks, crisis? What crisis? Those with memories of Jim Callaghan, although he didn't actually say that when he came back, criticising MPs and the Prime Minister for their alleged failure to keep the country afloat.
Well, time to go through the rest of the papers now, and joining us this morning is the former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker and journalist Ella Whelan. We've got an Ellie and an Ella on the desk today, so we're going to have lots of, well, hopefully no confusion.
Mock that up.
Norman, should we start with you, shall we?
Yeah, you had a little sort of smile on your face remembering crisis. What crisis?
I remember that very well from Jim Callaghan's day, which he didn't say, as you said, Mark, and he came down off the plane, I think, at Heathrow, and was
Guadeloupe, I seem to remember, in the Caribbean.
That's right, yes, and was confronted with this headline. But then again, Charlotte Holmes said elementary my dear Watson, did he, apparently, in any of the Common Law books. So these things get made up. But anyway, the one paper you didn't cover, by the way, was a Metro, which has a headline saying PM attends a meeting, which is quite funny, really.
And a picture to prove it.
And a picture to prove it.
What's the point of the picture if you didn't actually do anything in the meeting we wanted? But there we are.
That's also true. Anyway, on the Daily Express here, this is the shocking new warning, it says, which is true, it is shocking, that energy bills will hit £5,000. And this is partly from the TUC, saying this will be 2 months' 2 months' salary, I think it is.
2 months take-home pay, yeah.
2 months take-home pay for individual people, which is a huge amount of money for people who don't have very much to get by with. And I have to say, when you look at some of the solutions being put forward, Liz Truss talking about no windfall tax. I don't understand why there's such a resistance to dealing with the massive profits which BP and Shell and other companies are now.
Well, and Centrica, of course, the owners of British Gas. 1.6 billion operating profit for the first 6 months of this year alone.
Indeed, and if you look at the individual pay, I have to say, for people in the energy industry, this is in The Guardian, John Pettigrew taking home £6.5 million a year, National Grid making profits of £4 billion. There's no shortage of money around.
Yeah.
And yet the people who are faced with the biggest problems are the ones at the bottom of the pile who don't have any money. This is not
as you pointed out, they're paying those energy bills out of taxed income.
Indeed, that's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely so. So you have to ask yourself what the solution is. I think Ella's going to pick up on Sunak. But
you've spotted that in the Times, that there may be some scheme that Rishi Sunak's got up his sleeve.
Oh yeah, whether you call it a solution or a scheme, I suppose, is the important point. Sunak's not doing much for his sort of image as the rich benefactor who kind of throws a few coins at the nations now and again. He's becoming more and more like Lord Snooty by the day. But he's come out with this new pledge, as the Times calls it, to fine £10 billion in order to help, he says, soften the blow of what's to come in the winter. We know that, and the Times actually reporting here that it could go up to £5,000, which is, eye-watering. It feels like it just jumps by hundreds of pounds week on week on week.
Well, I think 250 jumped the last one with the analysts on or yesterday, in fact, they came out with that figure.
Yes, and so bearing that in mind, what the Times reports that every household will benefit from a £200 reduction. I mean, it's like, you know, it's like throwing water in the ocean. It really doesn't cover anything. And the thing this kind of race that's happening between Sunak and Truss as to who's going to pledge more money, obviously anything at this point for most households is going to be welcome because who's going to turn away free money when you're facing such serious crisis? But the biggest problem is that neither candidate is putting forward any kind of long-term solution. They keep saying, Truss keeps saying, wait until September, and I'll announce an emergency budget. For many people, that will be too late. And there's no discussion about the roots of this crisis, what will actually happen to prevent things like this happening year on year on year. Very little discussion about any kind of energy infrastructure, very little discussion about any kind of long-term economic plan. And the thing about Sunak is he's someone who I think, this is kind of more a point on the leadership race. He's proving to be someone who is not necessarily bending to public will, but buckling to kind of the pressure of not having any answers. So he's someone who's made his entire name so far on the idea of sort of fiscal conservatism, being very sort of sensible with the money.
Although he splashed the cash, obviously, with the furlough scheme and business loans, which aren't being paid back because a lot of those businesses suddenly disappeared into the ether.
And he's spent the last few months criticising that as if it was someone else that did it, saying we can't find money from anywhere. And then now to suggest that he's just going to blow 10 billion. I have no problem with the government spending money, but the issue is there seems to be no long-term strategy. And even with the question of a windfall tax, I mean, I have no love for energy bosses. I say take as much money from them as you want, there's no problem. But that's not a long-term solution. And actually, I think the windfall tax gets talked up too much as this wonderful solution to everything, and actually it amounts to peanuts for most people when it comes down to the effect on households. So it's really depressing.
What do we make of Gordon Brown's suggestion that we nationalise energy companies?
Well, it's rather extraordinary, actually, and I heard your previous guest saying that was going to bring the risk to the public sector and let the private sector take the profits, which seems to me to be a possible outcome. So, but I have to say that Gordon Brown at least is on the scene saying something. It's not quite clear whether the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, is. It seems to have gone on holiday.
Well, he's ruled out nationalisation, isn't he?
Well, he's not anywhere, is he? He's not in the papers. He's nowhere. I don't know if he's on holiday, but this is, I have to say, politically, a golden opportunity for the opposition parties, Labour, Lib Dem and SNP, to be getting stuck in, and they're not anywhere to be seen.
Should we fast forward to your story in The Guardian? Because we're about to get, we think, this national drought, or maybe possibly a drought award, and you spotted something in The Guardian there with a rather dramatic front page.
It is a dramatic front page, and of course we have got the normalisation now, it seems to me, of very high temperatures in this country. Normalisation in terms of them recurring regularly, but also people now accepting this is where we are. I mean, we're talking about, again, in London and the South East in particular, tomorrow, and Wales, I think, as well, temperatures reaching 37 Celsius, which is, let's be clear, this is 100 Fahrenheit. And the idea of having 100 Fahrenheit in my youth would have been extraordinary. It would have been impossible to imagine that occurring. And now it's happening all the time. And of course, if you have a tinderbox situation in Britain where everything is really, really dry, then the least little spark can set this off big time. And we could end up with very dangerous situations across the country, fires blazing as we're seeing now in France. And I have to say, this is from someone who wrote a document back in '89, as I did, called What Powers Our Planet. This is climate change big time.
What do you make of Robert's comment, who's emailed us this morning and saying, I'm fed up with all the doom about the heat wave. It's summer. If it'd been a wet summer, it'd be too much rain doom. He says it's simply Mother Nature, isn't it? What do you say to that?
I don't think it's Mother Nature, unfortunately. I mean, except Mother Nature's responding to the increase in carbon and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. I mean, we are seeing an upward trajectory of carbon emissions, an upward trajectory of temperatures, and this is partly the consequence of that. Look, I mean, it's perfectly true that we all worry about the weather, whatever the weather is. That's perfectly right. So Robert's right in that sense.
Ella, we don't need to fly off perhaps anywhere because it's so hot here. But if we are going to fly off, it's going to cost us more, according to Michael O'Leary, Ryanair. And we were speaking to experts yesterday about this, and we won't see perhaps the likes of, I think it was 99 cents one flight used to be, launching off, or even the sort of €10 flights anymore.
And Michael O'Leary was very careful to state that this isn't to do with Ryanair's concerns around, it's not bending to the kind of calls to make flights more expensive in order to counteract or do something environmental. This is specifically about jet fuel prices soaring. So, I think probably most of us knew that things like, particularly in the current economic climate, things like this weren't going to, 99 cent flights weren't going to go on forever. But I think there is an important point to make about the importance of cheap flights, about the importance actually of, culturally, of people being able to, ordinary working class people being able to get on a plane and go somewhere different and see the world. And
even if it's bad for the environment.
Well, and the thing is, we always say, rather than say, what can we do to expand people's choices? We always say, stop them from doing anything. And the people who get stopped are people at the bottom. Yeah. And just in relation to, it's a similar thing in relation to the drought question, because it seems to me like the people who talk about people getting off the hook, the people who have got off the hook at the moment are water companies. I mean, the gumption of Southern Water and Thames Water telling us not to, fling a few jugs of water on our dying flowers.
3.1 billion litres lost through our system every day.
Holloway was underwater the other day near me. And there's a really simple fact talking about infrastructure, which is that there have been barely any reservoirs built since 1973 in this country. Yeah. I mean, what is going on if that kind of level of planning hasn't happened? So I think we would, we're a nation that moans about the weather. We might still be warming, whether it was wet or warm, we might still be complaining. But certainly if we didn't have this question of drought, if we had some infrastructure to meet the new challenges of climate change, then I think people might not be so miserable.
We'd have less to moan about.
Yeah, but like you said, it's going to have a big conversation about infrastructure and where we go moving forward. I mean, lessons will need to be learned from this, won't there? Because it's not good. We have to leave it there, I'm afraid. We're short of time. Norman, Ella, you're going to be with us in the next hour, aren't you? Thanks very much.